it's not you, it's the job. You are not failing at this. You were promoted because you're good at your job. But this is a new chapter. It's a lateral move, even though it might seem vertical in terms of money and prestige and hierarchy. It's really a lateral move. So you need to learn the ropes. It's a hard job. It's thankless. When everything's fine, no one says anything. When something is wrong, everyone comes to you at the same time. So it's perfectly fine to give yourself that approval that this is hard and I need some time to figure this out.
Hello, everyone. Hello, listeners. We have a very interesting guest today, Piotr Tomaszewski, who is currently based in Warsaw, Poland, with lots of international experience. Piotr is a design manager, leadership coach, and mentor. Piotr, we're really happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Very excited.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Piotr, did I miss anything in describing you to our listeners?
There is many more things that make Piotr a person, as a husband and a father. But I think in the professional terms, that's what I do. I always struggle to kind of name myself because, we live in a society where everything has a particular label and is boxed by it. But you've described the biggest interests, professional interests I have. So after 2 years of a break, I came back to a leadership role as a design manager again. Aside from that, I have a practice as a leadership coach, and I have even older practice of design mentoring and overall career mentoring adventures along the years. So yeah, these are the three things I'm exploring right now.
Excellent. And as we discussed slightly before the beginning of our podcast, we're going to talk about support gap for new managers. And the first question I have is how this topic became relevant and interesting for you, Piotr?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a mix of my own experience. So I was promoted to a manager quite rapidly in my career. I was throughoutly tested and supported through the way from a senior specialist, senior designer to a manager. I had a great manager, amazing manager who helped me identify the gaps and cross it. So from a senior to a manager, we focused on team leadership experience. I get to coordinate a big project with a team. We were talking a lot about hiring. So whenever we had a candidate interview, my manager debrief with me and hear me vetting and kind of evaluating candidates to make sure that I know what I'm doing, but also for me to have exposure. So I have a pretty smooth path to become a manager, but from the moment I was promoted, my manager was my peer. And this is where the real gap happens, right? You could be prepared for the function. You could identify what all the building blocks of a new role are, but then you're still unprepared to the depths of it. As a specialist, you have your tasks, you deliver them. By the end of the day, you can point at the thing and say, like, see, I did that. As a manager, I was like questioning myself, like, why am I here to do? How do I move the needle? How do I multiply impact? Am I helping or am I coming in the way? If I'm asking questions, chasing people for status, trying to communicate idea, am I micromanaging or am I too leaned in, too leaned back? Like a lot of those things I have to go to myself. I then quickly understood, thankfully, through my support circles, that the problem is not unique to me, that it's a part of becoming a manager, like we all go through it. And I realized my new boss is in a different function. I started reporting to a head of product. And while they were doing a great job as a head of product, maybe not necessarily had inclination and training also to be a good mentor for a design leader, right? It was kind of odd. It always happens when one function reports to another function, then there is a certain level of understanding each other that is missed. So very quickly, I started looking externally outside of my company for support. And I also did stuff within the companies that I was to create support systems like peer learning groups, masterminds, kind of informal mentoring exchanges where I would help another leader with a topic and they will help me with another topic. So this has been my interest for years now, because I realized what is oftentimes presented to employees, which is leadership development training, which is workshops, which is onboarding kind of materials. It's very shallow in the actual understanding of the experience for the first time. Functionally, it's quite good, right? How to give feedback, here's a framework. How to do this, here's a framework. How to evaluate a talent's performance, here's the framework. You can have all the framework and still make a great mistake. You can learn by heart what feedback you want to say and do it by the book, and just happen to deliver on the day where a person's pet died and they have a terrible day and it explodes in your face, right? So it takes some finesse to understand that it's not like, hey, how are you today? I'm good. Okay, there is a thing I wanted to talk to you about. Here's the feedback. But rather like you really kind of see the person, like something is off in their body language. But they say they're fine. Yeah, fine today. Yes. There are things that only experience gives you. Once you think you're prepared and everything's fine, yet it feels off. And then you're like, I wonder what's off. I wish I had someone to talk it through. And that I wish I have someone is the hypothesis around which I build my practice. I want to be that person for other people, because I don't want them to kind of get stuck in the loop of thinking either they have to have all the answers themselves, or that there's no source for these answers. One just powers through and gets by without it. I think there is a way. The third way is to find support in a neutral, impartial way outside of your organization. Part of me wants to say that it's kind of unfair. It should be provided. Everyone should have a great manager. But the more kind of pragmatic, realistic part asks their in question, which is, what if there isn't that support, right? So in the end, we need to do what we need to do. We need to find ways to get what we need elsewhere.
Piotr, you described this really colorfully, may I say. It really hit home, because I know I've been through a lot of this experience. I've heard a lot of this experience from other people. So I'm sure there will be a lot of bits resonating with whoever is listening. I would like to find, because obviously you described this journey, and it is a massive journey, a massive change from doing the work to leading people. What is the hardest bit for you that you found? That switch between, during that switch over. Here's one day you doing the work, next day you're leading people. What was the hardest bit you had to tackle?
There were two things that I found really challenging, and I help people with that challenge. I'm always surprised how my two things were different than what I hear the most. So what I hear the most is actually the disconnection from the fun part of the job, from the craft, from what you used to be really passionate about, that made you really senior as a specialist. That was never a case for me. I always treat my design work as a means to an end to achieve certain customer outcomes rather than design for the design's sake. So maybe that's why I was like, that was not like being hands off was not such a problem. What was a problem, though, is related, which is when you're very hands-on, at the end of the day, you know what you've achieved. You know whether it was a good day or a bad day by the amount of output you have and the quality of the output you've created. Deep thinking is something you just simply must have in your calendar in order to deliver on your goals. As a manager, the hard part was that how will I measure whether I'm doing a good job? It's so relational. So that was until I figured out that each probation period, my direct supervisor, my manager, will ask 2 or 3 people I work closest with, how well am I doing? Until I figured that out, I was quite confused, right? I was like, how will they know I'm doing a good job? Now I know that, well, there is one person in charge of making a decision, and there are people I'm exposed to a lot. So it will make sense for them to consult with them and make a decision based on what they hear. So what it means for me is that these relationships are key. I need to invest in them, into making sure that my goals match the goals of my manager. Otherwise, we're working on the other side of the spectrum.
And how did you navigated that? Because obviously you're waiting for that, let's say every quarter for that period for feedback to come. And you do know that you're trying to invest in building relationships with your team, trying to gauge how they're doing, where are they at mentally, where they are at work-wise. How do you measure that for yourself? Because at the end of the day, I always find that we do have to have that measure for ourselves. So the end of the day comes and you look back and thinking, how well did I do? Or could I have done better? And what was that measure for you in that respect personally?
Yeah. I mean, what applies to me and to everyone is that as it's relational, the success criteria are very qualitative. So you need to spend a little bit more time understanding how to measure them as opposed to more quantitative metrics. For me, is that if I see gradual opening in the relationship, if I see signs of humor, of like just, talking about things that are not purely work related, if there's less awkward silence when you go through an agenda and have 5 to 10 more minutes, if there is also, like, I don't know how to say it, but like little acts of kindness, as if a person asks you, how are you doing? As a manager, oftentimes you start your one-to-ones with like, how are you doing today? And no one asks you back.
Yeah.
And then when they do, it's a good sign. It means like they're invested in the relationship. So that's one thing. The other thing I've noticed is like I've become very, very good at reading body language. Like the silent nod of approval of a stakeholder is oftentimes the only thing you can get at the end of the day. So you said something smart, you presented a good idea, and you see the VP of product there, and they're like, they will never tell you. Maybe your manager will hear it over the water cooler one day, but maybe not.
Maybe just a silent nod.
Yeah, maybe they come from a culture where, when it's good, there's nothing to talk about. Like I also experienced that working in Germany a little bit, that this seems to be a bit of a cultural norm, that feedback is meant to be more constructive, because, well, then there is something to talk about. If it's good, well, as expected, what should we spoke?
Yeah, we always expect good, right?
Yeah.
So if it's good, there's nothing to talk about. That's
So it's
interesting.
tricky.
It's an interesting point to mention that actually culturally that could also make a massive difference on how we operate and how we navigate these situations, because oftentimes now we all work across even all three of us talking right now, we're talking from 3 different locations in the world. And very often these days, our teams also are located in different places. They come from different cultures. So that's a very good sort of highlight to remember that there could be implications when it comes to cultural adaptation as well.
And most of these things, right, they sound obvious: having emotional intelligence, possessing soft skills, being culturally aware. So these are obvious things, and especially they are very important for the manager. So from your experience, Piotr, on one hand, having these obvious things, but what is the reality? How do companies prepare for those obvious things, newly appointed managers?
I think they don't. That's the problem with change management. I think most companies stop at broadcasting change, or broadcasting expectations, or broadcasting how we do stuff. It's like, here's the document, here's the policy, here's the training. You can click through the slides in the training and at the end do a quiz and now you're prepared. But then the change management have the biggest quagmire in the middle is actually people go through change at different pace depending on their level of maturity, their level of seniority, all the kind of messiness that makes us human. Most of the time, I think we are given tools and toolkits, and this is meant to be pragmatic. It's meant to empower people to get up to speed fast. The problem is, if it's the first time I'm drilling a hole in the wall, I might just drill through the wire and like lose the electricity in my whole house. That might demotivate me from drilling. That's the real story that happened to me. I'm not great with power tools, or at least that's the limiting belief I carry because of that one accident. So I was given a tool and I was like, you want an outcome, you want a picture, go, find a way how to use it. And I think what is the missing bit, and is what I do with my clients, is the integration of knowledge. So we have knowledge at our fingertips. We have knowledge that could be indefinitely reframed, made simpler, summarized by AI, presented in a voice, video, and text form. So like knowledge and processing knowledge is not a problem. Integrating knowledge is a problem. I can get all the summaries I want and listen to 17,000 Blinkist short books, but if I don't have a space and time and willingness to integrate it by doing, I will not change. I will just default to my other patterns. So I think that's what companies are missing. Instead of having a leadership training that is one person, one professional trainer, like broadcasting a lot of information, then separating people into small groups, what have really helped me in this moment from being totally overwhelmed by this role to somehow feeling like I'm on the surface again, was something that a manager created in my first company, which was essentially, it was supposed to be a roundtable kind of open topics type of a group for people managers, but it quickly turned into people manager community of practice, which was a mix of supervision, mastermind, and just a venting space. So we were all working in a matrix model, meaning our team members are embedded in teams, but we are not in those teams with them. So we don't see them work. They report to us, and we have peers across different functions. So in the end, you might have a lot of peers. You might also have peers in your own function. Like I always had more than one design manager in the organizations, but it doesn't mean we work together. We were next to each other, and everyone was like kind of siloed in their own experience of being a manager. So that community of practice was something that really helped me. It was one of my first experiences with coaching and kind of space holding and facilitation. It was very, very much a gateway drug, to be honest. And I benefit a lot from both hearing other people, trying to chime in and help, or just like not participating actively, but hearing, and then on my own time reflecting, how will I solve this issue? How will I apply this? How will I deal with this thing, So that was one of the first things that I've learned can work. And each company I join next, I try to, if there is one, I try to join it. If there isn't, I try to initiate it, because I think like that's informal, but it's really powerful.
So that community of practice, I'm just thinking, trying to think from the point of view of learning and development, and also sometimes minimizing cost, right? Because it's easy, it's financially costly, but you can hire someone like a great coach to coach the new managers. But what you have described now is using internal resources that do not cost anything except for time.
Yeah. And I think that's the very reason you mentioned is also the reason why it's mostly not being done, because L&D teams, learning and development, they also operate within the budget and the return on that budget. So the return might be big, but as there's no budget, initiatives like that are naturally being missed. And if they are not being created from bottom up and get a little bit of boost, they just go either unnoticed or they just simply don't exist. So I think it is kind of overlooked because of that. Work with L&D teams before, and I think like there are sometimes within your organizations your best friends for new managers, but you need to kind of also deal with the challenge of, we have a training, like it's a ticking of boxes. And we go to my previous point again, which is you have knowledge, you have tools, you've been given them, you have access to them, but like where's the integration happening? And I think integration on the group level in this container of a community of practice is really good also because it doesn't make you feel alone and isolated with your issue. Working with a coach or a mentor separately one-to-one is taking that integration way deeper, right? Because you have another brain with you on the topic. Passively or actively, giving you stories, giving you advice, not giving you advice, guiding you with questions, whatever the kind of modality is, but you have full attention of one person. So I think that was my path from like understanding I need that support. I don't get it in the place where I'm looking for. So first within the organization, I find my way to that group. Then I tried to create those groups. And then at one point I wanted someone that will, help me with my particular issues that were reflected in the group's experience, but maybe not to an extent I was looking for.
So what you're describing is there are different ways to approach this, right? One is through making this community practice groups.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, in parallel, also coaches or mentors could be engaged externally, internally to help to deal with certain issues, maybe that cannot be discussed openly. Can you tell us more about how does it look like when, let's say, a client approached you, he's a new manager, you're the leadership coach. What do you guys do in those coaching sessions?
There are different ways that when I reflect on the client I work with, there's like a couple of ways people usually find me. So it's either on the events, usually in small groups when I'm talking about what I do, like people, that's, I've heard about someone, or I'm someone who also have this issue. And then other is like my contents that I write about the experience. But once we meet and agree on what will be the underlying themes of work, and I always try to, during the initial kind of intake, discovery calls, I try to understand whether the person sees the issue as purely external or a mix of external and internal. If someone is way more educated in terms of self-discovery, maybe a bit self-mature, they can know that, oh, that's actually, sometimes I lack confidence here, but sometimes I just simply don't know what to do when this happens. And I'm like, great. I'm most interested in working with people who already are somewhere on that self-discovery journey. My best clients are ones who are also either in therapy or have been into therapy. That seems to be an added bonus because they don't look for the problem only externally, right? That makes my work much easier. Sometimes that makes my work even possible, I would say. Because again, if you lack that connection to the internal, you might not be able to integrate the tools and the techniques, right? What do? It's a mix of reactive and proactive, as I think most managers' day jobs are. So some sessions are, this is the thing I wanted to talk to you through because it's big and stressing me out. Big presentation, huge buy-in, stakeholder management issues, employees at the flight risk that might take the feedback in a bad way, and then what happens? So before I give any advice and share the stories from my experience, I try to understand what is the challenge behind the challenge, right? So yeah, that person is underperforming and they need to get this feedback, but they're also very unhappy with their work, so they might leave, and then what happens? What are you afraid of? What happens if they leave? Is what is really the part that scares you, that kind of what's the monster underneath a bed sometimes. So that's one type of work, and it's kind of quite fluid, right? When work gets hard, people tend to bring a lot of these reactive topics that they react to their day-to-day experience, and I try to help. And then more proactive ones are during the intake and the discovery session, we make a list of goals, long-term developmental goals without clear timelines. So if someone wants to get promoted to the next level, I don't usually ask by when, but more like what would it mean for them? Because there is a part in that promotion that is probably motivating, and whether it happens in 6 months or 2 years is probably less driving of a force than if it's getting them to the direction they want to go. So there are also weeks where people are less stressed about day to day, and this is where we explore where is it all going. So we put down the fires. Now, how that fire could be avoided by helping you grow to the level that you want to grow? How can you get to the next level? It's not always purely professional oriented, I have to say. My deep belief is all relationships are connected. So our patterns, whether it's people pleasing or is it micromanaging whenever stressed, they are probably happening equally on both our professional lives and personal lives. So sometimes people bring a topic that seems like a work topic, but in fact is something about them that we might explore around, rest, relaxation, fun, joy, the lacking of those elements in their life, how that might be adding to the stress of work. So sessions tend to be pretty fluid in practice. Connects the whole kind of topic together is that it's always a mix of, oh, this thing happened and I want to be prepared, or I want to kind of reflect on this, versus I want these things to happen in the longer run. So either more reactive and more proactive, depending really where a person is. Sometimes it's a mix of both, pretty much 50-50, depending on the week.
Yeah, I also notice with my coaching clients that the issues that manifest themselves in professional arena, they tend to also show up in personal relationship. And so there is a big incentive for clients to work with coaches like yourself, right? Because not only they're resolving only work-related issue, but looking deeper at underlying things that may be blocking their development or not allowing them to communicate properly. One quick question: in your coaching experience, are there any specific patterns that you see across different clients that kind of show up in many instances?
Yeah. I think because of the support gap and because of certain qualities that make you a manager potential. What I mean by that is usually managers who get promoted internally are the ones who are good in people work, right? So that they have a baseline level of empathy, of understanding how communication works, of like having a feeling of how it is dealing with people. Because of that, there's one pattern, which is I've worked a lot with, I don't want to micromanage. I'm afraid of being a micromanager, kind of fear, which pretty much never happens because people are so afraid that they compensate on the other side. Maybe it's a specific nature of most of my clients who are coming from design or technology, which are creative and highly complex fields. So micromanagement if someone experienced that, they know that usually doesn't help. You cannot, micromanage your way into innovation, for example. You need to let the person explore. But I've noticed most of my clients want to avoid that, but I don't feel it's never a real possibility. It's actually, sometimes I make them aware that while avoiding micromanagement, they actually lean back too much and stop providing direction and stop supporting their team members in their own opinions. So that's one thing, which is this kind of, I'm afraid of one end of the spectrum, so I compensate on the other. So the work is to balance them out. Where is the time to show your authority? Communicate the change on the team you expect and what behavior changes you want, how you're going to measure that without like being an authoritarian leader. It's just like, it's your job to expect certain things, Hey, can you let me know by Friday end of day what's the progress on this project, because Monday morning I need to report it to my boss. There's nothing antagonizing or like mean here. It's just clear expectation. But a lot of my work is around, this is fine, you can do this. What about this? Have you tried this? Another pattern, I think, I think the concept is called the fool's game, which is fool's dilemma, that both choices are bad. Someone will lose, and the work is finding the third way, realizing that stress and being overwhelmed or lack of awareness of certain elements of the puzzle piece makes you only see those two paths, and they're in fact suboptimal. But there might be a third path that is slightly more optimal, or might be a way better path that you just haven't noticed yet. Related to this, there is something, I'm not sure is a pattern or just like a result of picking one of the two bad paths, is that in a situation where someone might get hurt, my clients tend to hurt themselves. So instead of hurt by, in air quotes, I mean, if there's a workload issue in the team and hiring takes a long time, instead of trying to spread it evenly and add more to the people who are already stretched, they tend to do the work themselves overnight, over weekends and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a self-sacrificing thing. Because, both options are bad. Who should suffer? Is it other people? No, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to micromanage. I want to be a bad boss. Let me suffer instead. The problem with this is, for people who've been trained in transactional analysis and Karpman's triangle, is that when you try to rescue other people from harm, you might have at one point pay so much of a price yourself that you start feeling like a victim yourself, or you start persecuting others. Like, well, when is someone going to help me? So I think that's
This
common.
is exactly the problem I faced with one of my clients last week, actually. And when we discovered together that because of some of the team members were missing, sharing the work among team members on a temporary basis would actually benefit the team spirit as well, because the captain of the ship is saying, guys, we're on one boat, let's do it together. So this was actually an opportunity to unite, to have more deeper sense of teamwork. And so, I agree. I mean, sometimes, most of the time, there are more than two possible ways. And here, the value of coaching comes in, right? When you have a third outsider helping you to take a pause and look, are there any other alternatives rather than those two?
Very true.
Taking those blinkers off, like you said, Piotr, and just seeing maybe other better options. And I have a question, because obviously you described that you have gone through this journey. You described the support gap. You described how you have seen you were lucky enough for the first time to be supported by your manager, which is fantastic. And I always applaud people that put in work in with the new people and, spreading the knowledge, sharing what they've learned, because It's very hard to come by these days. But if you were to be again in the position of being brand new manager, maybe somebody's listening right now in the same position, found themselves completely no support, thrown into a deep end, so to speak, of a completely new role, what would you say, one advice you would give that person? I know you mentioned coaching, support, but what else can they maybe right now today do to support themselves or gain some sort of clarity?
Yeah. I have to say that each time I became a manager, it felt slightly different because it didn't feel like so shocking. My manager promoted me from senior to manager, and it was the last time I really had a great manager. There were other experiences that were good. It's not like it was universally bad, but like that one was like exceptional. And I think it's a bit like a teacher in school. We usually just remember the ones that were terrible and the one or two that were amazing that makes us a lifelong learners in the field, that makes us curious
Yeah.
about, in my case, it was history and literature. I have great teachers in those fields. Anyway, to answer your question, the first thing I was lacking, and I would love the person listening to this saying, like, it's not you, it's the job. You are not failing at this. You were promoted because you're good at your job. But this is a new chapter. It's a lateral move, even though it might seem vertical in terms of money and prestige and hierarchy. It's really a lateral move. So you need to learn the ropes. It's a hard job. It's thankless. When everything's fine, no one says anything. When something is wrong, everyone comes to you at the same time. So it's perfectly fine to give yourself that approval that this is hard, it's tough, and I need some time to figure this out. Another kind of idea is respecting your time as much as you respect everyone else. Most of my companies, the companies I work at, there was a open calendar policy, right? Like we share the digital calendar and you can book a slot whenever someone has a calendar free. You want to be available, but if you just never block anything for your own thinking, that's going to be an endless firefighting kind of journey. You're like jumping between contexts, and sometimes we just need time to think, to integrate. So what helped me a lot was writing, like a practice in journaling. Not so much about structuring and planning and stuff like that, just mind dump, to be honest. Like that's everything of today. Then you can always look at it or not, but it kind of helps you to clear your mind and approach the next meeting and the next project without that baggage, that residue, that process kind of thought matter, whatever that is. And I would, the third advice, because I think advice come in three, so naturally, is to find a person. It doesn't have to be a mentor or coach. It could be a friend, could be a peer, could be someone that, maybe someone you started with, your onboarding buddy. You're in totally different teams, different roles, but just for the first 2 weeks, you've been like eating lunch every day, whatever. Find that person that you can ask them, hey, am I crazy? Or so they tell you you're not crazy, because 99% of the time you're not crazy. What your experience is shared. It's just you're in a role that make you exposed to people that report into you, that you're supposed to lead, people on your level that you're supposed to collaborate, and people above you that demand stuff from you. Where is your team? Where is the people that you're actually having the camaraderie and venting and, sharing adventures? That goes away mostly. So find that person. Could be a peer, could be a person in the different function, whatever.
Yeah.
One person that whenever you feel like something is going on and I'm not sure, like is something wrong with me or with the world, you can always send out a message.
I like that, actually. Yeah, I like that. I would call it a sanity buddy. And
yes,
I know a lot of people do sort of crave that, and they do, if they're lucky enough, they do find that person. And sometimes it's outside work, but it is more useful if it's within work, so they understand the context. They understand the characters in play, and they can sort of relate and say, yeah, you know what, you are not crazy, this is tough, or maybe this situation is not okay, or maybe it's even different. Maybe they will give you some sort of an observer sort of input, saying actually you can play that in your advantage, like actually an opportunity, sort of like a coach without the label.
Yeah.
But that's a great advice. I
Yeah.
like that.
You
But this,
branded it so much better, Anastasia. I think like I wanted to say safety valve, but that's very technical. It can also lead to a beautiful friendship. I have a friend with whom I started in the same function but in different teams, and that dude, am I crazy or have
Yeah.
turned into a regular burger meeting where we just like right now, like it's been years since we don't work on the same company, but there's always something we can
Yeah.
do to each other, to listen, to support each other, to celebrate our successes. So I think while it could be a little bit like a coach without the label, at one point it can also become like a work friend. Slightly
Yeah.
different than, the friend that you have outside of work that maybe are like very long relationship that continues through the years. I think like we need both, we need people who are, because that's my problem with approaching everything as a kind of as a coach. When sometimes people say about their hard experience, if it's a coaching container consensually entered by two people who have clear roles and one person paying money for that usually, I will hold that hardship and emotions and try to get them to see something, maybe notice something, get them to a better place, or actually not get them, let them get to a better place, hopefully, right? I cannot get anyone anywhere. As a friend, though, when someone says, I'm struggling with this and that, sometimes the appropriate response is like, oh my God, me too. And just hugging them or like laughing at it through, which is, you wouldn't like a coach interrupt you and say, me too,
Yeah,
actually.
no.
I also struggle with imposter syndrome, right? So I think it's like, as humans, we need everything.
Although that would have been a quite interesting, quite interesting session if your coach did say that.
Yeah.
Sometimes in my coaching conversation, I may share my experience, which not only provides validation for the coachee's feelings experience, but also shows that coach is a person, and also, there may be some practical tips. Piotr, you shared very useful pieces of advices, right? Advice with our listeners, but those are internally, right? Those self-help things that they can do. However, companies should be responsible for the well-being of employees, training of managers as well. So if there are any learning and development professionals listening to our podcast, they heard about coaching and mentoring, all of similar things. What would be your advice that would tip the balance in favor of providing more coaching services and also helping with this practice group initiatives and other tools that help new managers become more effective?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because both sides, the end users, the receivers of these services, and people who oftentimes are decision makers in companies in L&D, understand the situation way differently. So my advice to the L&D would be like, there are easy kind of things to fill your checklist, which is a well-known author of a book that has a 5-star rated workshop that is by the book, always goes the same, and it's kind of easy sell, it's just a big ticket, or fluffy, uncertain, whatever the coach is. There is a random coach, they don't share any notes, you don't know what's happening there, you're buying a cat in the bag, as we say in Polish, right? So these are two polar sides of the two polarities, and then there is a third way, which requires from L&D to be expecting certain clarity on formats, types of work, topics that are okay and not okay. It's perfectly fine to limit the scope of work in a professional setting to not touch upon, inner child development and things like that a coach, first of all, doesn't have to be equipped to do. Second of all, might not be interesting for the company to sponsor. It's a fair game, right? Like, just because a client would benefit from that doesn't mean a company wants to sponsor that. And I think it's, as I understand both sides of the story, I also would advise the L&D try to understand that there is an overlap between what an individual would like and what a coach is able to provide. You could shape that expectations together. And that's the missing part for me, which is it's much easier to sponsor a training that has a sales page with every minute of the workshop written down. But with coaching, the power of that is actually the flexibilities, is actually matching the coach's capabilities and experience to your team needs. So you need to open up a bit. You need to co-create this together. with this book author kind of, stock like workshop from the shelf, you will most likely not be able to customize it so much because that's their material, that's what they're selling. So here's an opportunity to build something semi-custom. If you would do it internally, you would have a coach internally, that's fully custom, right? The coach understands things on the deep level and they can create something custom. With coaches, there is always an interest that one can follow. I am coaching a leader in a company. I was talking to her about something. We were connected for years, and then the company just jumped on the opportunity to sponsor it for her because it matched her interest, it matched their needs. Also, there was a situation where they wanted to provide her with a signal that they really are invested in her growth. But instead of letting her choose whatever coach, she already kind of bring me through the door. So that's the tricky part. And I think advice is to be open to that. Instead of treating everything as a box, here's stock workshops, here's a list of vendors that we work, a little bit of openness to people that are maybe not on the list of vendors, but are experiences and their work is matching the needs of specific teams, with the caveat that you can totally shape it together. I think every mature coach, experienced coach, will not accept work that is too much, that will be too much tailored away from their kind of zone of genius. But at the same time, we are also flexible. We're flexible to the client. We can be to a certain extent flexible to the company, right? It's important to be open to this.
The learning and development professionals, they would also benefit from coaching. To see what coaching is, not just about reading about it, but to see how flexible and how helpful it could be.
Yeah, I think
seeing is believing, isn't it? Sometimes there's so many training, so many approaches these days out there for learning and development to tap into when they want to bring something in. But I think if you have hands-on experience on something, you're more likely to also know whether that's going to be right for you, whether that approach will be what your company and the people in it actually need right now.
I'm pretty sure, Piotr, you have so many things to share with our listeners and with us as well. But unfortunately, we have to wrap up our episode today. Any parting thoughts that you would like to share with us, Piotr?
Yeah, I think it's the theme I've been thinking about is... in ideal world, you get everything, right? You get a sports massage and a personal trainer and a dietary coach and a professional coach and a mentor and a hypnotherapist, everything, right? But we're operating in a world where you don't always have all the resources for a lot of that. So I think what I try to do with clients at the beginning is to map their situations, what needs and goals they have, and where do they map. It's not important what do we map against. It's important to bring the awareness that things live in different places. I don't sell emotional support, but emotional support is a part of what I do, right? But people don't pay me for emotional support. They pay me for some professional development mechanism, place, facilitation of that. But it starts with when you're considering what do you need, one approach is to just list everything and realize if you would sum it up, it will be like 2,000 euros every month. And then you also have no other time for anything else because you will be in self-discovery and development all day. The other thing is to map it out across different parts of your life. I had a coach that helped me develop my intuition and trust it. And then I didn't work with that coach anymore. Then I had a coach that would kind of help me connect with my body. And that also ended at one point. I had a business coach for a long time. That also kind of concluded its parts. And a fitness coach as well. And I didn't try to have it at the same time. I was just trying to kind of map it against my mind, my work, my family, my health, whatever criteria you want to do, just to make sure that things live always in relationship to other things. Because we are one. From our point of view, we are one coherent being. But in fact, there are multiple moving pieces inside. Sometimes one of those pieces require more attention first. So what I kind of want to share is that instead of trying to look for all the solutions or one solution that will have all of them, I invite people to think it through different parts of you and timeline. What needs my attention first? What needs my attention second? Sometimes a relaxing massage could really help you with performance review issues. I know it might devalue what I just said in kind of promoting my services, but sometimes all we need is that burger with a friend or a massage. Sometimes we need a couple of sessions with a coach, and I don't think there is one thing that works for always. Instead, I think our life gets richer once we give ourselves approval to try different things and see, like a pair of shoes, kind of walk up a couple of steps and then see, do they fit or do I need something else? And then also seasons change. So in a different season, you need different shoes. That's
okay.
yeah.
Right?
That's
You don't need to have all the answers for everything all at the same time. You can just take your time.
And this is amazing. I mean, one key takeaway for me is it's useful to have a high level of self-awareness, and it's important to listen to yourself. What is important at that moment? Piotr, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If someone wants to work with you, either maybe learning and development professional or a new manager or experienced manager, what is the best way to contact you and find you?
Yeah, I have it's a bad decision in the naming, but my website is first letter of my name and my whole surname, which is really hard to pronounce. It's ptomaszewski.com. LinkedIn is also a way where I'm easily findable. That inbox is not too hard for me to stay on top of. I also have a project with another coach, actually tailored to this L&D kind of side of things that you mentioned. So if someone from L&D would like to talk about, still, I will involve the other coach into this chat. And then I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. It's like my website contains both the client stories, testimonials, also in more detail describes how I work. It could be a good starting point as well if someone's just kind of trying to understand what I do in more detail. But LinkedIn is my favorite inbox of all of them.
Excellent.
It was great having you on the show. Pleasure listening to you, sharing your experience, sharing the work you do, and obviously all the details that you mentioned we will share down below to anybody listening, so they'll have an easy way to access any information they need from you and get in touch with you.
Thank you. I will remain a fan of the podcast, so now it's going to my list of follows. That will be
that's great to hear. Thank you.
Something I'll be
Thank
looking forward to every week or two, depending on what will be the rhythm.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much, Piotr.
It was great. Thank you.